Hello, my friends. I am Mr. Kasey, as my son's friends call me. My son's 2 and 3-year-old friends call me Mr. Kasey. Anyway, welcome to The Burden of Ego, Dissolving Yourself. I thought I'd do a mini lesson on this concept and kind of talk about the ego, the burden of ego, dissolving yourself. We're going to talk about how to dissolve your ego and how the ego is used. Well, let's just get started. If you probably noticed, I'm using my son's dry erase board and it has paint all over it. Forgive my appearance. So let's talk about the ego. The ego is used, they feed our ego to keep us in the illusion. What does that mean? They feed our ego. They want us to be somebody. They want us to think we are somebody and that we're doing something. They want us to think we have control. Who's they? These are the controlling beings that are suppressing humanity, as I talked about in one of my previous videos. And they are feeding off us energetically. So they use our ego, they keep us attached, because whenever we're attached to anything, and we're going to talk about today, the main reason I have this board is the circle, the center, and how we want to stay in the center of the circle and what that means. So when they feed our ego, they're keeping us attached. When we are attached, you can be attached anyway. We're attached. We're in our ego. We think we're somebody doing something. We think we have control. We think we know. We think we know, right? So when we think we know, when we're in our ego and we think we know, what does that mean? What happens? We're kept in lower perspectives. When we think we know something, let's say this is us right here, that we're facing this way. That's what way we're facing. We think we know. So we cannot see anything above here. We cannot see anything else. We can't see anything else because we think we know. So we're kept in a lower perspective because it keeps us attached. Anytime we talk about the ego and being attached, when we're attached, we're somewhere in this circle when we're attached, and we'll never be able to see the highest perspective. We'll never be able to know the truth because we're attached and we think we know and we think we're in control. That keeps us at lower perspectives. That keeps us in the illusion because we're attached to something. And as long as we're attached to something, you can't see everywhere when you're looking at one point. You can't see everywhere when you're looking at one point. That's what it means. So what does it mean to stand in the center of the circle? Let's juxtapose that, right? Standing in the center of the circle. What does that mean? When you stand in the center of the circle, you're the observer. You're not attached. You're looking at everything equally, and you're not judging, and you don't have bias. So when you're in your ego, you have bias, and when you have bias, you can't see the truth because you're keeping yourselves at lower perspectives. And this is the whole game plan of the controlling factors on this planet right now. This is why it's pretty obvious when you look at what they do to our minds. They keep our minds in chaos. They constantly feed our minds chaos and keep our minds scattered, because a mind in chaos is a mind controlled. A mind in chaos is a mind in the ego. A mind in chaos is a mind attached, right? And then when we're attached, we're kept in lower perspectives, and when we think we're somebody, and we think we know, and we think things are happening to us, as opposed to what? As opposed to being the observer, and as opposed to we're just nature running off. We're not in control. Control is part of the illusion. Control is part of the ego thinking it's somebody and it's doing something, right? The ego, we think we're somebody doing something, and then here's control. But there is no control, and we're not somebody doing something. This is where we're going. This goes into dissolving the ego, right? Dissolving yourself. What did I call it again? The burden of ego, dissolving yourself. I thought that was a decent title. What do you guys think? Let me know what you think of this lesson as well, and if you have any questions on how I'm explaining things. So when we stand in the center of the circle, this is very important in presence and purification and God's love. This is very important in this whole scheme of things. Because when we stand in the center of the circle, we're the observer and we're not attached. So we can't get held down in lower perspectives. We have the grand perspective. And when we're the observer and we facilitate a peaceful state, which is bringing in peace in every conceivable manner to allow our minds to calm down so we can stop thinking, and purifying the body. And when those things work together, this is how we dissolve the ego slowly, slowly. It takes a long time. I catch my ego all the time. I say, hey, what are you sneaking up here for doing that? What are you doing, ego? It's still there. You're never going to get rid of it completely, and that's not the point. The point of this is not to, when I say dissolving the ego is always a part of everything that's going on. Well, depending how far you can get, I guess, right? What about the yogis with cosmic consciousness? They're always present. They don't really, it's there as a part of them being a being on this planet, but at the same time, you know what I mean? They don't care about the opinions of others, right? When you get rid of your ego, that's one thing that holds us in lower perspectives, caring about people's opinions. And why do we care about people's opinions? Because we think it matters what they think of us, because it's all part of the game of we think we're somebody and we got to be something and we got to do something. We think we're somebody. We think we know. That's our ego. That keeps us attached in lower perspectives. So when we're in lower perspectives, you can't see anything else. You can't see it. You're looking here, right? Let's go all the way back to the beginning. This will be fun. This will be fun. You guys are going to like this. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Here's the circle. That's where we want to be, in the center of this circle, because we're not attached. We have no egos. We're the observer, and we are the divine. That's what happens when we stop thinking and we're in the center of the circle. We are the divine. You are God. You are letting God experience itself unfiltered, without all of our made up mental garbage and emotions, and being attached to all these things, thinking we're somebody. We think we're somebody inside, where it's like we're somebody inside of a somebody kind of thing, because we're the observer behind the somebody. We're not our bodies. We're not our thoughts. We're not our senses. We're God observing itself through one of infinite spectrums, right? And it's all one anyway. It's just we're all but a thought in the mind of God. Think about that. That's a big piece of banana to put down the pipe. You know what I mean? Anyway, where do we start? Let's go back to the beginning. I'm kind of going to go zigzag all around here. When we're born, we're basically right up against the circle. That's our perspective when we're born. So we're going to start when we're born. And we immediately get fed intense conditioning and programming, especially food. What they do to kids, what I see with my son, and in all these kids' books and these TV shows, there's constantly food that destroys the human body. The pizza and ice cream and candy and cakes and all the processed food and all this garbage and soda. You can see what's going on. You keep stepping back far enough. You keep moving closer and closer to the center of the circle. You're going to see everything. You're going to see exactly how this world is run. And the toxic food program. I have a video about that. Briefly, what is the toxic food program? When I say the toxic food program, is a program specifically implemented on this planet and has been done previously. Again, you keep stepping back. This is what you see. You see this. You see, if I was going to control a planet, I'd use the food program. I'd use the food system, right? Because you're suppressing the whole conscious. You can suppress the consciousness with the food system. You can suppress energetically. You can suppress everything. You're keeping the perspective down, and the food we eat affects us completely in every conceivable way. Our mood, how we see things, our IQ, all these different things, right? Our energy, and it keeps us doing lower vibrational things because the food keeps us down. So this keeps us in a lower perspective. So right when we're born, this is all we can see because we don't know, and we're fed a bunch of garbage to kind of basically keep you down. Everything we're fed from the mainstream society, the prison society as I call it, because again, they use the society. The society is built specifically designed to suppress humans and keep us suppressed. Look at the medical system. medical system is, look at the medical system next to the food system. You kind of see what's going on. They've created a self-limiting population that accepts the self-limitingness because we don't know, because they keep our perspective low. Look at TV, look at entertainment. They keep our perspective low with the food. We don't know. We think you getting sick is random. It has nothing to do with what you eat. What? The chemistry we're taking in has nothing to do with the chemistry of our body? That should be something that's obvious, maybe if we were closer to the center of the circle, but we start so down low with our perspective so low that they control our perspective. We don't get any outside say, basically. And it takes an act of God, in a sense, in our awakening, to start to get jolted out of that. What's interesting is evil sows the seeds to its own destruction. So the worse they try to suppress us and limit us and feed off of us, it actually initiates a part of our awakening, basically. Because you can only give so much suffering without someone getting knocked on the head and be, wait a minute, I've been suffering a long time. What's going on? Wait a minute. This is not how it's supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be suffering like this. I'm not supposed to be sick. Wait a minute. I'm not supposed to be thinking all the time. You know what I mean? We got to get knocked on the head enough times to break out of this initial perspective. A lot of people don't ever get out of this perspective. So what happens is, when we get enough, let's start the circle over again. When we get enough of a trauma or something to that effect, or sometimes greater powers, we're starting there, right? We shatter our initial perspective, and it allows a little light in. It allows a little light in from different perspectives, right? And so then our perspective starts to grow. It grow gradually, and then once that starts, you can't stop it. That's just a natural process, right? And then there's still going to be cracks. There's always going to be some little light coming in once it starts to grow, and eventually we start to see that there's a center to the circle, and we gradually dissolve ourself through things like meditation and presence. Because the more you stay in the present moment, the less you're identifying with yourself, with being somebody, the less you're identifying with your thoughts, which both keep you attached to lower perspectives. So get rid of the thoughts, and what happens? Your perspective starts to go up. Start purifying the body, getting rid of the thoughts, your perspective starts to go up. You start to go closer to the center of the circle. This is how you dissolve the ego, by stop identifying with it. But the problem is they feed us so bad that we always identify with the ego, so it's hard for anything to get in unless we have some sort of initiating activity that starts our awakening. But they're the ones initiating the activity through the suffering. And what's the whole point of this whole course is how do we escape the cycles of suffering, right? That's the base of my course and what I teach. This is all part of how we escape the cycles of suffering, because one of the main reasons we're in most, or if not all, of our cycles of suffering, because we're being suppressed on purpose. They're feeding our ego, and it's keeping us attached. It's keeping us in lower perspective, so we can't see how the suffering is happening. We can't see it clearly, because we have so much chaos that's constantly fed into our minds, and our bodies are so aggravated from the toxic foods program that we can't handle it until something makes a little chip in our perspective armor, right? So we start all the way there, and then we gradually but what happens when we think we know? And then they feed our ego, so they feed us the wrong information, and then we think we know, so we can't see the truth. When you think you know, think about this. If you think you know, and you've been told a lie, what happens then? But you know. So what we need to do is take that approach to everything. If you want to see the highest perspective, never assume what you know is the truth. How I look at it is, let's say with my diet, with fruit and detoxification, right? I've seen enough information in my life and people's results and through my own results and my improvement in my own health by eating all fruits, raw fruits and vegetables, things like this, that for me it makes sense. But if you came to me, remember, we want to be in the center of the circle. If you came to me and said, what's the right diet for humans? I would say, I don't know. But I can tell you from my experience, this is what I see. See, I'm not attaching myself to knowing anything, because you don't know. You can't think you know, or else you'll never be in the center of the circle. You can't think you know anything. You think you know what shape the earth is, because then you're going to be caught in the lower perspectives. What if you're wrong? Even if you think you're right, it doesn't matter. So just don't attach yourself. That's the whole point, is not to attach yourself to knowing anything, because how much have we learned, and even in the last 5 years, that we thought we know and was keeping us in a lower vibration, in a lower perspective, turned out to be wrong, right? So you need to apply that to everything all the time, and that way you don't get attached to anything, and that way you can get your thoughts out of it. Because when you think you know, and you're in the ego and you're in the thought territory, because they all work together, thinking and thinking you're somebody, and thinking you know, because you got to think about things you know, right? But if you don't know anything, you don't got to think about nothing, right? And the whole goal, and the biggest, one of the biggest foundations I mean, everything works together. I talk about, right? Facilitating a state of peace, right? That works with all of this, because it all serves a function to calm the mind, stop thinking, and calm the body and heal the body, because they work in conjunction, and that directly affects your body. And again, they use food specifically to suppress us and to feed our ego and to keep our perspectives down here, right? They don't want us to even know about the center of the circle. Most people don't know there's a center of the circle, right? Most people don't know there's a center of the circle, because they're so hardwired. Even think about how hardwired this perspective is. When most people get sick, or especially very sick, or get cancer or any disease, which is not a real thing, it's just a set of symptoms, and healing your body can be done very easily, but our perspectives is kept so low. Think about this. You could go to the grocery store if you have cancer and buy just grapes. That's how easy it would be. And you would clean your body out and heal your body. But guess what? Everybody thinks they know. They've made it so everybody, this is a hard line. Most people will never break. Most people will never break that line, because you can see that because most people eat themselves to death and or are victims of the medical pharmaceutical system, right? And then what we eat affects our whole lives and how we act and our chemistry. Remember, we can only make one decision. So let's look at this real quick. We can only ever make one decision. That's based on our chemistry or conditioning and level of understanding. Now let's look at our chemistry. The lower our chemistry is, the lower we're going to be acting, and right? And so if our chemistry is full of acid, we're going to be more angry, more aggravated, more more prone to be into violent things, like watching violent movies and things like that. So if they're going to keep us, all these acids, all our chemistry is going to keep us low. What happens when you raise our chemistry to alkaline, to light, to energy? What happens to our actions? Our actions start to become better. You know what I mean? We start to have more pure actions. We start to have more actions toward God the higher we get, because we're opening our channels and we're broadening our perspective, and our chemistry is changing. So I just wanted to make that little tangent. So most people never break free this perspective. Even when they get so sick, they have some sort of disease, they go to the hospital, they don't even know, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault, because we're all actors in a play. Remember, we're just nature running off. We're just the observer. It seems like we have control, but we don't. Control is an illusion. It's all, the play is already written. I'm going to give you a quick example, then we'll go back to the ego. Like, I've had kind of clairvoyant type, if that's what you call it, dreams my whole life of seemingly random situations. And I was like, I don't know who these people are, or what's going on in this situation. Years later, now this has happened so many times I could not count, because it continues to happen on a regular basis. And then in my life, let's say 5 years later, the exact situation will happen, and I will recall the dream of it. Like, I was talking to this person who I didn't even know at the time on the phone and saying the exact things in this exact store. So this has happened to me so many times. So I think, wait a minute, I think I'm making a choice. I think I'm making a choice, but all these dreams I've had always come true years later. Well, then what choice have I been making if my dream was telling me what was already going to happen? My dream's trying to show me. My dream's trying to show me there is no control. That's how all the old gurus knew what was going to happen ahead of time, because it's all written. It's all in the records already. You know what I mean? So most people never escape this hard line, right? But when we start our awakening, we start to let a little light, a little other perspectives, and we start to go toward the center of the circle. So let's talk more about dissolving the ego. Now we've talked about the ego and what it is, and attachments, right? Attachments, anything we think we know, or we think we're somebody doing something, or we think we have control, things like this, or keep us in lower perspective, so we can never see the whole perspective. And the highest perspective is basically God's perspective. It's everything. You're seeing everything, so you're open to everything. You're open to it all, and you're not limiting yourself in any way. So dissolving yourself. So how do we chip away at this thing that's keeping us attached to the illusion and is keeping us from seeing the highest? We want to see the highest perspective, which is basically silence, which is the present moment, and being that as much to, if not all the time, because that is the highest divine action we can be, is being in complete surrender all the time. That's one of the highest devotions to God, being present, and purification, because we're purifying the body. I just realized it kind of looks like a face over here. I don't know, it took me that long. I haven't been looking at that part. So surrendering, that's the highest action to God. So that's how we have the divine flow. That's how we have our highest actions. That's how we have God working through us. We want to be vessels to God, basically. We're not thinking, we're the observer, because we know there is no control. And so we're letting God control completely, right? Because we're not trapped in the ego. So that's what we're doing by doing this, and by dissolving yourself, dissolving your ego. You are becoming the highest version of yourself. This is about becoming the highest version of yourself. What is your higher self? Your higher self doesn't mess around down here. I hate to tell you, your higher self doesn't think it's somebody. Your higher self doesn't think it has control. Your higher self is in the middle. Well, let's redo it. We need a clean circle. Higher self deserves a clean circle. Wouldn't you agree? The higher self deserves a clean circle. There we go. There's higher self sitting pretty in the middle of the circle. Doesn't think it's anybody. Doesn't think it knows anything. And that's what we're doing by dissolving our ego, is by slowly allowing the higher self to take control until we get to the point. Remember, what does even the Bible says? You don't got to worry about a thing, right? Don't got to worry about a thing. Just give it all up. Empty your mind. Facilitate a state of peace, right? Get the balance. Purify the body. Empty your mind. Just become one with our cosmic beloved. That's what we're doing. So this whole process, as a part of all the other processes I described, facilitating a state of peace in every way, because removing the aggravators. If you're not familiar with the aggravators, I've made a few videos on the aggravators. I will absolutely make more videos on what are the aggravators and how do we remove them, because it is so important. Because the aggravators, I'm glad I brought it up. The aggravators are what is used to keep us in lower perspectives. They are constantly throwing these aggravators at us to keep us in lower perspective, because that agitates the mind. It stimulates the mind. And when they do that, they're keeping the cycles of thought going, and they're feeding the ego. That keeps us attached, which keeps us in lower perspectives. See how this all works? Isn't that crazy? So that's why the aggravators are so important. We have to remove the aggravators, or else we will never be able to stop thinking, which is our main focus, is presence, right? Because presence is the divine, is God. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. This is a mantra I say many times a day, because to me, I am God's eternal love pouring forth. I am a vessel for God. I am not caught in the ego. I'm giving it all up. That's the goal, right? That's how we become our higher selves. So that is what we're doing by dissolving the ego. And what are aggravators? Real quick. You can never talk about aggravators enough, okay? What are aggravators and how do we move them? Aggravators are anything that stimulates the mind or the body and to get us out of balance in a bad way, right? I know there's not good and bad, but we got to use it for the purpose of this lecture. So these aggravators are things like anything that stimulates thought. Think about it. If we step back far enough, we say, well, TV stimulates my thought. All right, you know what I mean? Chalk it up, you know what I mean? What else? Video games, social media, pretty much anything. Reading books. Eventually, you're going to reach a point in your journey. It's funny, I went into the bookstore today to get a book for my son's friend for their birthday. And I went in there, and when I used to go in the bookstore, I used to say, man, I want to read this book, I want to get this book, I want to get this book. Yeah, I mean, you might see where I'm going with this. Now I go in the bookstore and I say, I'm good. I'm good. You take enough information, and then you get to the point where you realize you need to empty your mind. How about that? You take it all in until you realize you need to get rid of it all. Ain't that some shit? You know what I'm saying? And so you realize, wait a minute. I made a video. I'll make another one about reconstituting the mind. What I did to reconstitute my mind inadvertently at the time, but now I understand what I was doing naturally. You got to empty your mind. You got to clean all the junk out the mind, and you realize to do that you have to stop taking in new information. And you say, wait a minute, to get the answers that I'm looking for, I can't be looking for them. I got to empty my mind and let them come to me in the highest state, because that's the divine flow of the infinite creator, is when we empty our mind. It's the divine is always trying to send us messages, but can we hear them? Can we receive them? Or are we too full of the aggravators keeping us down? That's why you got to remove the aggravators, guys. I'm going to keep saying it. If you're stuck, this is what I realized through my own experience. All these things are aggravating my mind. I notice, if I play video games, what happens after? My mind's aggravated. It's not peaceful. So you got to facilitate a peaceful state all the time. This is what I mean by this. No matter what you're doing, if you're going to listen to music, facilitate a peaceful state as much as possible. And this helps reconstitute the mind, which helps us get into the center of the circle. Everything works together that I'm talking about, you guys. That's what's so great about it. You can start over here, but guess what? You're going to end up here. Oh, what about this thing over here? You're going to end up here. Well, wait a minute. I got a curveball. Do you now? I've tried many curveballs. I always end up here, right? This is why all this works together. We need to remove the aggravators. We need to always facilitate a peaceful state. We need to practice presence. And remember, practicing presence, it's a practice because we're undoing a lifetime of conditioning of aggravators. That's what practicing presence is doing, is trying to remove the aggravators. And so we can be in a peaceful, divine, present state, which is God. That's how we become vessels for God, right there. And we don't have to think about anything or do anything or plan anything ever. I didn't write this lecture, right? This is just me trying to be open and letting it flow. Because you don't need to think about anything. Think about this. It's like, well, what if I need to plan this sort of event? You think God needs to sit there thinking how to plan things? Doesn't matter what it is. You'll take care of it because you're basically God's taking over for you. Don't worry about a thing. That's what the present moment is. It's say, here you go, God. Go nuts, dude. Show me what you got. And God's like, all right, dude, let's check this out. Check this out, dude. Let's get your son's whiteboard. Check this out. Let's get your son's whiteboard. Bring it in the basement, even though it's got paint all over it. And do this crazy half-an-hour lecture about dissolving the ego and breaking free from the illusion. Here we are. So I think I've just about covered everything I wanted to cover in this particular lecture. I'm just trying to sum it up. Let's go back real quick and just sum everything up. So remember, the foundation of dissolving the ego is becoming the divine, becoming your highest self. That's how we become our higher self. We remove the aggravators. Aggravators. That's number one. If you can read that, remove the aggravators, because the aggravators is what's keeping us in lower perspectives. And once we start removing those, we'll start to see, oh, I'm gaining a little bit more balance. I'm starting to see a little better now, right? Remove the aggravators, and we always want to facilitate a peaceful state. Facilitate, and sorry about my handwriting, it's pretty bad. Remove the aggravators, facilitate a peaceful state always, right? Reconstitute the mind, which kind of goes along with everything goes together. Reconstitute the mind. I'm a bad example for handwriting. Reconstitute the mind. Remove the aggravators, facilitate a peaceful state, reconstitute the mind. This is how we dissolve the ego. This shatters our perspective and lets in light, right? And all this does is dissolve yourself. You're calming the mind. This is all in an effort to calm your mind, because when you calm your mind, you're detaching yourself from your ego. When you're in the present state, you're dissolving your ego. You're detaching yourself from thinking you know, or thinking you're somebody, or thinking you're controlling something. So what is expectation? Expectation is the ego vying for control, right? Why would we ever expect a result of anything? Even any job you do, anything you do, that's your ego vying for control. That's why the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, if that's who actually wrote the Tao Te Ching, this dude knew what was up. You know what I mean? You could tell this dude knew what was up, because you may not get it at first, but then eventually you're like, oh, this dude's straight telling me to stand in the middle of the circle. This guy's like, yo, if I just tell people to stand in the middle of the circle, maybe they'll get it eventually. He knew what was up, you know what I mean? Do your work and step back. That's what somebody who's standing in the center of the circle says. Do your work and step back. Why does he say that? Because you're not attached to the result of anything, because you're not in control, because control is part of the ego. You know what I mean? Lao Tzu knew what was up. They were just sitting there, just channeling God, dude. He was completely in the present moment. And he wrote that. And how did God use him? God, he reached this, nirvanic type state in the present moment. He learned all these things through all this time of inner reflection and meditation and communion with God. And God knew whoever wrote this book was going to write this book. He knew he was going to be asked, like, yo, dude, I'm going to hook this dude up so hard. And then he's going to get asked to write a book. Well, so the story goes, so he writes all this stuff down. And you know what he writes down? Stay in the center of the circle and let all things take their course. Be the observer. That's what he's saying. Do not be attached to anything. He who thinks he knows is a fool. He who knows he does not know is a wise man. Something like that, right? That's another quote from the Tao Te Ching. Go listen to the Tao Te Ching, or at least read it, or just get the audiobook on YouTube, guys. I listened to that thing like 50 times. You just take it in. And that can be part of reconstituting your mind. Things like that. Obviously, spiritual books and things are very helpful when you need them. But at a certain point, like I said, you're going to realize the answers we seek cannot be found by searching. The answers we seek can be found by surrender and letting it all go and just being. Right? Think about Jesus wasn't sitting there cramming books, you know what I mean? He was meditating in the mountains for 40 days. He was communing with God. He was clear in his mind. That's how we be unconditional love, like Jesus. That's how we do exactly how. Do you want to be like Jesus? Here we go. Remove the aggravators, facilitate a state of peace, reconstitute the mind. Clean the mind, empty the mind. You will become unconditional love. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. That's the whole point. So no matter what we're doing, we're observing us doing, or however you want to phrase it, we're just God's love pouring out of us to everything and everyone all the time. That's the goal. Now, again, every day is a practice. We're chipping away at the old ego. We're getting closer and closer to the center of the circle. Sometimes I catch myself. I'm like, why do I care? Why do I care about anything? And what causes a lot of our issues in our lives, our mental issues, getting caught in our ego is judging, right? We're judging people, how people look. Why are we judging how people look? It doesn't matter. None of that matters. That's all part of the ego. That's all part of our programming. That's all part of what we got to chip away at. to get rid of that hard line that exists for most of it. And again, we have no control over any of it anyway. You know what I mean? It's all karma. It's all already written. So it's funny that we're even sitting here talking about this because we have no control over any of it anyway. I had no control over ever doing this, and you had no control of watching. And remember, when it comes to things like shame, regret, and guilt, things like this, these are lower perspectives. These are going to keep us in lower perspectives. They keep us attached because they think we have control. There is no control. Get rid of that. Get rid of the thought of control. Just give it up. That's why, what is surrender? Surrender is giving up control. Surrender, what they said in the Bible is give it all up, right? You know what I mean? Give it all up to get it all. You have to surrender everything, including your whole ego, including yourself. You have to dissolve yourself to become unconditional love, to become God, to become one with God. You have to give it all up, all of it. All of it. You have to empty your mind and not be attached to any of it. You have to stand in the center of the circle. So let's go over. I've been trying to sum this up for 10 minutes. You got to remove the aggravators. Go watch my video. Let's talk about the aggravators. I just made it a few days ago, I think, and I also have another one, recognizing and removing the aggravators. I will make another video on it if you want. If any questions, please leave your questions below. Okay. And I will gladly answer your questions. I have videos on the aggravators. I'm going to make another video. I have one already on facilitating a peaceful state. I have a video on reconstituting the mind. Guys, I've been busy. You do your purification and you practice your presence and you make that your life. The divine will reward you. The divine will constantly send you just nonstop, okay? Because I can't, it's insane. I can't stop it. And I wouldn't dare. I tried to lay down and go to bed last night. I was exhausted. Guess what happened? Go make a video. I'm like, really? Okay. Whatever. I made a video. Let's talk about taking down the power structures of the world. Why not? You know what I mean? I've made those videos before. Who cares? Okay. The burden of ego, dissolving yourself. Thank you for joining this class. Any questions, please let me know. Any comments? I realize this is my son's whiteboard. I've been meaning to get a big teaching whiteboard, but they're a little expensive. You know what I'm saying? And plus I was like, do I really need one? I don't know. Maybe I'll clean it up a little bit better for you next time. Okay. The aggravator. See, I don't care. I'm trying to stand in the center of the circle. Some people might care about appearances such as a whiteboard like this. You got to not care about anything. It doesn't matter. No one's opinion matters because it's all part of their egos. Other people's opinions are their egos trying to hold down your ego. Ain't that something about opinions? They're just trying to, none of it matters. That's why to change your diet, you have to do a little bit of ego dissolving. You got to put a little bit of acid on your ego. I know we don't like acid, you know what I mean? To dissolve the ego a little bit, to change your diet, because we're trapped in these ego traps of culture and society and popular culture and things like this with our things like our diet. So we get stuck, that gets knotted in with our ego, and it's hard to get it to dissolve that. So a lot of people will not be able to change their diets unless they start doing some work first and work on balance and emotions and dissolving the ego a little bit, because you got to stop thinking you know anything about, especially what we're supposed to eat, because you just got to keep stepping back. You just got to keep moving toward the middle of the circle. Just keep reminding yourself, I don't know. I don't know. I have no problem saying that for anything because it's true. You know what I mean? What are you gonna? You go into court for something, and they ask you something. They're like, oh, he knows this, and you say, what's your name? You could say, I don't know. You could, if you want to stand in the center of the circle. I don't know anything. How can you suppose you know anything? The universe is infinite, and you're not in control. Control is part of the ego, right? So these are things you kind of make a checklist of you're practicing presence. You're checking yourself. Oh, wait a minute. I don't need to be doing that. Right when you start to judge something, no, don't need to do that. That's just my ego coming up. You can catch yourself. But also through purification, removing all the acids and toxins from the body, removing the aggravators, it gets easier, right? And you become present more, and then you start moving more to the center of the circle, and the divine starts coming through you more. So you just keep going. So I'm going to put Purification on here. This is really bad. Purification, right? This is how, because everything works together. This is how we dissolve yourself. This is how you dissolve all your attachments. You got to give it all. You got to empty your mind. You got to just basically always keep the thought process of, I am not in control. I don't know anything. I am not my thoughts or my body or my senses or my emotions, etc. I am the observer. And the observer is not involved. The observer is not the actor. Most people are attached to being the actor. The observer is not the actor. The observer is watching through the actor. Everything I'm saying right now is not me. I'm not control. I'm not in control. This is always going to happen. Whatever happens was always going to happen. That's what I was saying before about not having shame or guilt. At one level, people argue we need accountability. What level are you looking at? If we want to surrender completely, no, not really. There's no accountability because control is part of the ego. Accountability is kind of part of the ego. That's assuming there's control. Accountability is assuming control. It's a part of the ego world. Because when we come to the highest self, when God's controlling us when I am God's eternal love pouring forth, there's nothing going on. Nothing matters. You're surrendering completely to God. You are a vessel for God. You are communing with God, with the divine, with our cosmic beloved. Remember, there is no control. There's only the cosmic unfolding. We are just nature running off. We are just karma running off. So that's why all this can work together, as I've been explaining. And how did I come about this or learn all of this? You may or may not be wondering. Well, okay, I read lots of books. I'm not saying don't read books at all. Read some books when you need them. Read them spiritual books. Get into them books. Get into them Tao Te Chings and the Upanishads are great. They're all just a divine flowing through anyway. You're just reading the divine. So obviously that can always, if you want, be a part of your reconstituting the mind if it's of a higher nature, of course. At the same time, you may get to a point where I am now. I've got a whole bookshelf back here. I've read like half of them, but I'm not even trying to read. I'm not trying to read anything because you're trying to empty your mind. Like Ram Dass talks about this as well. My favorite teacher, my blessed Ram Dass. I love you, Ram Dass. He talks about you got to empty your mind. Eventually, you're going to wish you didn't take in all the information you took in because you're going to have to kick it back out. Ain't that wild? So we got to eventually stop reading books, stop listening to podcasts, stop scrolling, stop looking for the answers on like social media or on YouTube. You got to stop looking for the answers and you got to work on these things. You got to work on emptying the mind and being the observer and getting to the center of the circle. We remove the aggravators. We identify and remove what's aggravating our mind, what's making us continually have these cycles of thought that we can't stop. We need to facilitate a state of peace always. We need to make sure whatever we're bringing in is facilitating a state of peace. That's always the goal. Whatever we're eating needs to be healing and cleaning and energizing and hydrating the body. Raw, living foods. No animal cooks or processes foods. This is a higher perspective you can get to, but a lot of people can't see that perspective because they're still got so many aggravators. They're still a little bit too trapped in the ego. They haven't had enough of a jolt to crack them out of that hard line that we're kind of stuck with, that everybody in most of the world's stuck with. Most of the world eats food that destroys their health. It's not their fault. It's a program, right? We're part of a self-limiting population. But again, it's all out of our control anyway. That's just how it is. We're observing what's happening. And we're observing what we think we can do to change the outcome when there is no control. What we're going to do here, if we're going to do all this, is already going to happen as well, right? So again, it's just about surrendering completely. That's it. That's the divine. So purification is vital because this food is specifically used to suppress your energies. You're keeping us low vibration. Acid. Acids aggravate. If we're full of acids, we're going to be aggravated. That's one of the main aggravators. It's not just removing TV, right? It's removing the acids, all sorts of things. And you don't have to force yourself to remove any of this. all you have to do is focus on presence and purification and God's love and constantly surrendering. These things will fall off. These things will release themselves when you're ready, when you're balanced enough for them to be released. We have to do some work to get to certain states of balance to release certain things. So one of the biggest parts of this journey is learning to accept where we are, no matter where we are on the path of presence and purification, no matter what we're doing, and we may say, I need to remove this. Accept where you are. Do not judge yourself. Again, this is all a practice. We need to just remember to recognize this. This is the observer. Accept where you are. Don't judge yourself. And keep the focus on presence and purification. And through presence and purification, all will be released that does not serve our higher self, because we're just constantly becoming higher versions of ourselves until we get to the higher self, which is surrender, which is the divine present moment. So that is how we dissolve the ego in a nutshell. You remove the aggravators, facilitate a peaceful state, reconstitute the mind. Again, watch these videos if you haven't seen them, or if you have other questions, I will be happy to answer. Reconstitute the mind is cleaning the junk out of your mind, letting your mind rip if it needs to be. If you got as much time as you can possibly take to yourself, it can be hard if you've got kids or you got a job or you're busy. Obviously, I understand that. You got to take what you can. If you're struggling or you're stuck and you feel like, I got to get out of this, as much time as you possibly can. If you got 3 hours a day, if you got 30 minutes a day, if you got 5 hours a day, if you got 20 minutes a day, to just put on some relaxing music and just shut it all off. Meditation, but not necessarily. Not necessarily meditation. Yes, meditation, staying present as much as possible, but just letting everything relax and reconstitute the mind. You let the mind work itself out, but you got to be removing the aggravators at the same time, or else it's going to make it harder. It's going to make it harder to clean your mind out when you got things coming in. If you're taking in information, if you're taking in too much information, even if it's positive information, you might get to a point with me where I had to stop it all. I couldn't listen to talking anymore, because you're trying to empty your mind out. In any words, yes, they can be positive, but eventually you need to clean the mind. You need to let it all go. You need to be in silence almost. Or like I used healing frequencies and meditation music a lot. Let me talk real quick and then I'll end this. Again, everything's connected. The universe gave me a job which literally allows me to reconstitute my mind for long periods of time. I deliver packages for Amazon with my own car through Amazon Flex. And while I'm delivering, I'm listening to this healing music and letting my mind work out its shit. I'm not listening to anybody talk. I'm not taking in any information. I'm also not reading books. I'm not watching TV shows. And again, you don't have to force yourself to get rid of any of this. These will all fall off if you follow presence and purification. So the universe gave me this job on purpose, because otherwise I wouldn't have had this time. If I wasn't working, if I didn't have to work doing this, if I was watching my kids all day, which I'm not going to say I don't want to do, obviously I love doing that and I wouldn't mind doing that. But if I didn't have to work for whatever reason, the universe wants me to work, I wouldn't have as much time to reconstitute my mind. I wouldn't have 3-4 hours a day to just reconstitute my mind, just zone out, driving, delivering, listening to that music, going, just letting the mind rip, letting the mind work out all its programs, get me stressed out, because I'm just letting it work out. And then eventually they leave. Eventually programs fizzle out. They say, oh, you get to the bottom of it. If you reconstitute your mind long enough, you get to the bottom of all your kerfuffins, and everything you just start letting them go. Like, oh, okay. So that was really about me not accepting what is and trying to control. That was really about me trying to control when there is no control. Okay, I'm done with that. I understand. Doesn't matter. I don't got to worry about what anyone's doing. I don't have to worry about what anyone's doing ever, because I'm not in control. I'm just observing it all. It doesn't matter. There isn't a positive and negative. You're just observing it. Yes, on a level, there's what we perceive as evil and positive and negative. But really, it's all part of the cosmic unfolding. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So, what was I going to say? So the universe gave me this time. I had to remember where I was to reconstitute my mind. So as much time as you possibly can, let her rip. You know what I mean? And if you're trying to sit there for 3 hours, listening to the meditation music, and your mind's going crazy the whole time, let it rip. And sometimes you got to do it. But remember, you got to remove the aggravators, including your diet. If you're eating a really bad, acidic, dehydrating, aggravating diet, acids aggravate, then it's going to be harder. I mean, you can still do it. It's going to be harder, though. And again, what's one of the greatest devotions to God? Presence is surrender, of course. Purification, because our bodies, our vessels are God. We are God. So that's why purification, that's why it all works together. So as part of removing the aggravators is purification, and then which is helping you reconstitute your mind and facilitate a peaceful state, and you will release things not serving you. Don't judge yourself, accept where you're at, and there you go. And let's wrap this up at 50 minutes. Wow. So if you have any questions, thank you for joining me. If you made it all the way through, please let me know. Remember, standing in the center of the circle and watch all things take their course. Do your work and step back. Don't be attached to the outcome of your work. Just surrender. Empty your mind and you will receive all your... Stop thinking and stop talking, and there's nothing you will not know. They've been telling us, you know what I mean? It's, at one level we don't understand it, but then when we get to a certain level, we start to understand. You think I understood all this? If I was watching this video 5 years ago, I would have turned it off after 2 seconds, because I would have been like, what is this guy talking about? And now I'm here. And again, I read, how did I learn that? Back to that. I read obviously some of it from books, but obviously none of this is really from books per se, in different language maybe, but this is all something as I've been reconstituting my mind, some of this stuff that I've been floating around starts coming together, and you start to understand it. You're like, oh, wait a minute, now I get it. Like when Ram Dass talks about some of these gurus giving these speeches, and you listen to it, and you're like, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. But then as you keep going on your journey of presence and purification, later you're like, oh, wait a minute. Now I understand what Ram Dass was saying about where we're just nature running off. That just used to go right past me. We're just nature running off. We're just karma running off. You have no control. He has many examples about how he thought he was making a decision, but it didn't matter because something else happened, though. Because like Maharaji knew, because Maharaji has cosmic consciousness and can see time, or whatever you want to call it, right? So there's got to give up control. That's the hardest thing to do, because we think we know, and we think we're in control. That's the hardest part of dissolving your ego. When we think we're somebody, we're attached to our name, we're attached to how we look, how we dress, we're attached to all these things, which keeps us in lower perspectives. Come on, guys, you know this. You got to let it all up. You got to say, I don't care about my clothes, really. What we're going to go so far as, remember, you want to facilitate a peaceful state. One last quick note. Even your clothes can facilitate a peaceful state, because your fabric affects your energy in your body. That's why, like, this is 50% or 100% linen. Linen is one of the highest energetic fabrics that can actually be healing. Linen and wool, however, I personally don't use wool for the sake, because I don't use animal products. Because I'm an ethical vegan. Again, I don't label things. I don't want to use anything from an animal. I don't really want to. Who cares? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you do. I'm not judging you for doing anything, because you're just doing what you're doing. The only thing we can ever do is our best and act based off our chemistry, conditioning, a level of understanding anyway. So you can never judge how someone's eating. Your mind's going to want to, but you can't really. Why? They're not in control. No one knows how to do anything other than what they're programmed to do, basically. You know what I mean? And your chemistry, if your chemistry is aggravating you, if you did something bad in the past, well, what if you did something really bad in the past? My wife had a good example. She said, what if a husband, I made a video about how there's no sin. What if a husband cheats on her wife? Was he ever going to do anything different? No, because that's what happened. Did he have control? No, because you're assuming he is a control. The ego assumes control. That's an attachment. He was always going to do it. Yeah. I'm not saying that's not bad or good. It depends on what level you're playing at. And something that's always going to happen. You got to observe it. If you're the wife who got cheated on and you're standing in the center of the circle, you're observing it. You're not attached to it. You said that was always going to happen. The universe wanted to end this relationship by my husband cheating on me. So now it's going this way. That's what you'd be doing if you're standing at the center of the circle and something like that happened. If you got your leg cut off in a car accident, you know what I mean? If you were standing at the center of the circle, it's difficult because you're still living with pain in the physical world, and that's a part of some sort of suffering you're going through for a reason. There's never not a reason to go through suffering, because suffering is getting you closer to God. It is through suffering we grow closer to God. It is through suffering we gain wisdom, and it is through wisdom we gain the ability to help others with their suffering, right? So there's a reason we go through our suffering. It's not like all for nothing, because you gain wisdom from your suffering, and then you can use you're breaking free. Your suffering is helping you break free from this hard line. That's what your suffering is going. You're getting you closer to God, the center of the circle. That's why suffering brings you closer to God. Isn't that nuts? I just made that connection right now. No, I didn't. Well, I knew suffering brings you closer to God, but this particular, because the suffering breaks through your plateaus, it brings you, you know what I mean? And God's in the center of the circle. God is the observer, because when you are the observer, you are God. So your suffering, this is how suffering brings you closer to God and gains you wisdom. And then guess what? When you're in the center of the circle, after your suffering, you gain this wisdom and you're closer to God. What are you doing? You're helping all these people out here. You're saying, well, now I'm in the center of the circle. Let's show all these other people out in the middle of the circle how to get to the center. Let's invite them. Hey guys, you guys want to come over into the center of the circle? This is how we're going to do it. Remove the aggravators, facilitate a peaceful state, reconstitute the mind, purification, empty the mind. That's how we're going to do it. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to wrap this up around an hour. I kind of try to reiterate many points as many as I can. Again, I've been making a lot of videos. So please, if you're more interested about any of these topics or other topics, check out my TikTok or my YouTube. I also post on Instagram and Facebook. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you spending this time with me and going over this, because this is all there is really to do. This messy chart that I made on my son's dirty dry erase board is all there is to do. Can you believe it? That's it. That's all there is to do. Eventually you realize there's nothing else to do but presence and purification and getting to the center of the circle and becoming your highest self, which is God, the divine. Okay? So thanks I hear the baby. That's my cue. The baby's crying. I got to go help with the baby. Thank you guys for joining me. Remember, presence and purification. Remove those aggravators. Check out those videos I made. Facilitating a peaceful state. Reconstituting the mind is all very important. Take care of yourselves, guys. Take care of yourselves. Remember, don't judge yourself. Accept yourself for where you are. You're doing great. You're doing exactly what you're always going to do. Everything's in divine timing. There's no need to rush anything. We got plenty of time. We've been doing this countless times. Buddha saw his last 99,000 lives or something like that, right? And the time, one last little thing for you. That I love this thing. Buddha said something to the effect, imagine a rock that's a mile wide by a mile tall by a mile long. And every 100 years, a bird drops a silk scarf on the top of the rock. As long as it takes for those scarves to wear down the rock, that's how long we've been doing this. So we got plenty of time. Just let it all go, my friends. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. Namaste.